of capacity building team in Quest Alliance. I work as an online facilitator. I welcome every one of you to this masterclass on the promises and perils of online learning and teaching. This masterclass is organized by Trainer Tribe, online learning community for our educators and initiative of Quest Alliance. So hashtag Trainer Tribe. In case you want to write about this masterclass, share your experiences with your peers in your social media handles. Please do not forget to use hashtag Trainer Tribe. This is our official hashtag. So as you are aware by now that the host has muted you so that we can have a very engaging conversation and do not get distracted by any background noise. But we can use the chat box. Please feel free to keep it buzzing throughout the session and put your opinions, your thoughts whenever you feel like, and we will address your questions at the end of the presentation. And for this session, we would encourage you to keep your video on so that we can see each other for the upcoming activity. But there is no pressure. If you are not comfortable, you can leave it off. Okay, talking about Quest Alliance, it's nice to see lots of familiar names, and I thank you very much for joining us every masterclass. But to those who are joining us for the first time, Quest Alliance is a non-for-profit organization that works toward transforming school to work transition through self-learning. And we equip young people with 21st century skills by transforming learning ecosystem through educational technology, capacity building, and collaboration. So far, we have reached 4,000 educators across 50 organizations, having around 330 training centers across the country, working with 45 partners in 22 states and 7 state government partnerships. We thank our donors and partners for actually spreading the word and getting you folks here. We extend our gratitude for their continuous support. So going forward with today's session, we have a very amazing person and speaker. She is Ragini Lal, a learning designer. She is extensively working in this framework. We are extremely excited to have you with us, Ragini, and to let all of you know, Ragini is based in US currently. So the time there is, I think, just about 6:30 a.m. right now. So thank you, Ragini, for choosing to spend your super early Friday morning with us. Please take us through the promises and perils of online learning and teaching. So over to you, Ragini.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming in today. I hope I'm able to complete some expectations that you might have or just share something interesting with you. So before we start, I will share a little bit about myself. So as you can see, this is me, the little Zoom window on the screen there, navigating life like many others right now, remote working, remote living, blurring and negotiating the boundaries of work and life right now. I have many personal and professional interests and sort of mixing them up, matching them up. So can we get the mute fixed? Yeah. So just last year, I moved to America to study, but for my entire life before that, I was in India between Delhi and Bangalore. I lived in Bangalore for the last 10 years of my life, and here I did my undergraduate in art and design. And at Art and Design College, I really learned to appreciate the iterative and messy parts of a creative process. Following my time at Art College, I worked with Quest Alliance for 6 years with their education technology teams, working on many of the projects that you would see as part of their youth development vertical. And last year, I pursued my master's in education in technology, innovation, education, where I furthered my interest in broadly two areas: education technology and leadership development. Leadership development, where I have found it's one of the few subject areas where there's really space given to understanding ourselves and who we are, and really finding space for the personal within life. Um, yeah, so let's move on to the next slide. So speaking on Zoom is an incredibly intimidating experience, since reading the room is really difficult. How much is the group really engaged? It's really difficult for the orator to know. And I'm an online learner myself. I had to, really quickly switch to doing my masters in the online format suddenly last March. And so I know how easy it is to be distracted, and this medium is designed to keep us away from being very focused. So it takes some skills on our part to make it happen, and I'm going to anchor two activities that hopefully will aid towards really getting into the zone right now. So the first is a grounding exercise, and here I'm going to request you all to put your view on gallery view, and put your camera on if you're comfortable. So there's no pressure. If you're not comfortable, don't put it on. But otherwise, just put your screen on gallery view and really go through each and every page to understand who all is there in the room with us. Read the names, see if you recognize any, see the diversity that is there in the room, so that as we're progressing through the masterclass, I'm going to ask a few questions. I'd like us to feel that we're in the same, like, let's imagine we're in the same place, and we can bring that energy of being in a place with about 51 people right now. So I'm going to take 5-10 seconds uh, for that. It's nice to see everyone. Thank you for joining in. All right, so I'm going to proceed. So as we go over the agenda, we will cover what we mean by online learning very briefly. Then I will share two examples of online learning I came across as I was trying to understand the potential and limits of these technologies myself last year. And I will conclude with naming the various design considerations one needs to keep in mind when using these technologies. So as we're starting, let's do some intention setting. With the intention setting, I mean, take a few seconds right now to think about why are you investing the next, half an hour, 40 minutes into this webinar? What's your goal? And it's easy to be distracted, as we know. So what made you curious? Why have you really come here? And if you're comfortable sharing, share it in the chat window, so that we all sort of know, what is bringing all of us together in this space here today. So my goal is to sort of share some of the research work that I've done in the past year, and also sort of have a discussion around what we really feel about online learning nowadays, given the current circumstances. So this March, world over, we have seen that the world resorted to a new normal. The education sector is considered by most technologists as a latecomer to the technology party. And it's now in the midst of Zoom classes, Google Meetups, and a host of other online learning deliveries. What we see today is countries, organizations, teams coming together to pivot the way they do things, and also the way we're living life, honestly. But while moving teaching and learning online is the need of the hour, the speed at which teams are doing these transitions is unprecedented. And in the midst of this, there are many professionals, and some might be feeling, extremely excited maybe about these new tools, and some might be feeling completely overwhelmed and frustrated by all these new expectations. Um, and regardless of doing extensive evaluation studies of what's going to happen, it's easy prediction for us to make that everyone's going to have a different experience. It's going to produce a lot of varied results, and some solutions will be extremely well thought through, delivered well, and may even capture students' attention in new and different ways. And some are going to be, these quick improvisations due to less than ideal circumstances, just get something going. And that's how it's going to be. There's not going to be one standard way. And so for many, edtech has always been, like this side dish. It was like a char to parantha, or, chutney with idli. But COVID-19 has moved edtech now to the front and center. And as a learning designer, it's an equally exciting yet terrifying moment for me, because it's a moment that we really need to understand where we want this moment to take us. What's our vision for where we'd like this to take us? And I am just going to quickly understand what everyone has written out here about what brought them to the forum today. So learning about online learning tools, learning how teaching and learning can be optimized in online systems, understanding how to make online learning engaging, figuring out the efficacy of online training for underserved youth, um, working independently, and I want to know more about the general field towards online learning, how effectively can online platforms be used. All right. All right. So I hope I'm able to, I'm not sure if I'll discuss everything that we mentioned there, but I'll definitely have some interesting examples to share of some other teams that have done something in the past. And keep in mind, these were like extremely, there was no sort of urgency. These weren't done in an quick situation, but it's more sort of to sort of be like, what can online learning look like? So as I start, I'd like to understand, what is everyone feeling, wondering, thinking when I see the words online learning? What is that one word that is coming to your mind right now? Type that in the chat box. Flexibility, infusion, reach, accessible, information overload, technology, easy to use, comfortability, self-paced, quick learning. So as we're seeing, online learning means different things to different people. And could we move to the next slide, please? So as we know, as we're seeing, online learning means different things to different people. And it seems as though people also use, on the internet, if you type online learning, different people are going to have different definitions of the same. So we have very often online learning and blended learning are spoken about in the same breath. Many associated with Quest Alliance will know a lot about blended learning, the combination of face-to-face classes with learning done in digital environments. We have Spock's small private online classes, similar to what you would see with a lot of executive education classes. We have M-learning, learning done through our mobile phones, our personal electronic devices. E-learning, learning done through electronic devices. And a new term, which you will see in the lower left of screen of right now, is emergency remote teaching. So many education technology commentators are trying to draw a distinction between deliberately designed online learning and emergency measures that have, suddenly a lot of people are doing to transition from what they may have originally wanted to do as a face-to-face or blending learning format if this was not a crisis situation. And really, for me, I didn't want to focus on the terms and technicalities, and that what I really want to focus on is the learning principles at play in some of the interventions that I've seen. So we can move to the next slide. So I'll be sharing two examples of online learning programs, and both of them have used artificial intelligence to increase the learning outcomes beneficially. And what I saw as a technology aiding the conditions being created for the learner. And I thought maybe that would not have been possible. And the technology really had helped in creating those conditions. Yeah. So my core question was understanding the limitations and potential of these methods. And the first question, while I was evaluating these various case studies I was coming across while at college, the question was, how is technology being utilized? What is the role of technology in the teaching learning process? So a model used by a lot of education technologists is the SAMR model. It has been developed by Dr. Rubin, whose name you can see here. All my references are sort of on the screen. So if you'd like to, take down notes, you can always look at that. So the SAMR model is about degrees of classroom technology integration, and S stands for substitution, A for augmentation, M modification, R redefinition. So when you look at the tasks involved in the teaching learning process, if technology is being used to, let's say, substitute a task that was done in a traditional classroom, then it's substitution. So for example, if I was to use an online dictionary versus use a book format, maybe that's called substitution in the keeping in mind the SAMR model. If, for example, no, please go back to the previous slide. So if, for example, I have an essay writing exercise for the students, but now they're able to do that on Google Doc and they're able to share it with other people, that's a functional improvement. So that sort of augments the experience, augments the task, the sharing process, and that becomes augmentation. Modification is when you're sort of able to use some of the other parts to really change the task itself. So let's say you write an essay, plus you can add a video recording. So that's modification. And R is really redefinition, when you're able to do something that if you weren't using that technology, you weren't able to execute on the task at all. So for example, bringing in experts from across the world easily into one classroom without, the costs associated with that, all of that. So that would be redefinition. So keep in mind the SAMR model, because as I talk about the next example, we will come back to this in terms of identifying what that intervention is really doing. So we can move forward to the next slide. So apart from the question of the role of technology, there were three other questions I was looking at. The next question was, how has the intervention really impacted the learning outcomes? Has there been any gain? What are we seeing with regards to the learning outcomes? Next was, what is the nature of the learner group? What's their age? What subject matter? Where are they located? Stuff like that. And then lastly, did the researchers find any difference in the impact on learning between male or female students? Was the technology in any way creating some sort of systematic bias against any one particular group? So a lot of the research that I did was part of a class that I did organized by Professor Chris Deedy, who's a professor in learning technologies here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And once COVID-19, in March came up, he and a team of global educators started a sort of blog and webinar series called silverliningforlearning.org, which I put the link so you can write that down. And they're a great resource to generally follow during this time. Because they're covering what different people are doing across the world currently as they're transitioning into different modes of teaching and learning. I'd also like to say that a lot of my references are there in gray below at the bottom of my slide. So I don't have a references right in the end. So please, you can take down those pointers if you want to read up about something later at your own time and space. Yeah. So as I introduce this project, keep in mind the SAMR model and watch out for the tasks and where does this fit under. So the first project is Professor Ashok Goyal's project and team's project from Georgia Tech University. They're major advocates for using artificial intelligence in MOOCs being massive open online classes. And here is a quote from one of his papers where he builds a case for using virtual teaching assistants to augment and amplify the interaction that would traditionally happen between students and teachers. We can move to the next slide. So in their class, knowledge-based artificial intelligence at Georgia Tech, Professor Goyal and team have been utilizing a virtual teaching assistant called Jill Watson. You see those blue round dots, there were names written on that, which I guess in the midst of formatting has disappeared. But essentially that screen had Jill Watson, Ian and Stacy, 3 names of 3 virtual teaching assistants that this team has developed. And they do different tasks. They started working on this in 2016, and Jill Watson was operating in their discussion forum for a university level computer science course. And Jill Watson in 2016 went through a lot of training where Jill Watson was being trained by humans to be able to answer the frequently asked questions that students ask in discussion forums. Along with that, over time, as the bot became more and more intelligent, it was able to respond to student introductions, and it was doing that in a manner of every 15 minutes in a discussion forum. So let's say I am doing my online class, I put my introduction, or I put a doubt that I have, and one example is up there on the screen that you can see on the right hand side upper corner. And the bot was able to give answers in 15-minute intervals. The team felt this was important because closing the loop in those 15-minute intervals was important, since in online learning, we can get distracted. If you don't have support very easily, you could drop out very easily. So the timeliness really made a difference in this situation. Also, the team, the reason why the team felt the need to build this bot was that they had just moved online and the class size had increased, and their discussion forum was seeing a lot more contributions than the residential classes, and this was hard for their staff to manage and monitor. And so in order to respond in a timely manner, they sort of built out this bot. And these examples of this just sort of scratch the surface of what their team is up to. Post 2016-17, right now, right through 2019-2020, the team has built more and more bots that do very specific tasks. Like they're not going to do the way a human being can do a lot of complicated things, but they do very specific tasks. And recently they made something called Jill Watson Social Agent, and the objective of that bot is to build community in the courses, and that's the goal. They also use something called nano tutors, where the online modules, which look like videos to someone as they're looking at it, they appear as hyper interactive videos, almost with pauses every 1 or 2 minutes, where the learner is asked a question in those many intervals so that they can input, and any misconception is sort of reframed as they're learning. So if you want to understand more about his project, you could type Ashok Goyal, Jill Watson on the internet, and you're going to find a host of YouTube videos and others that really explain the mechanics in detail. And so let's move forward, and we're going to pause here. And the question I'm asking is, as per the SAMR model, how would you say that the team has integrated technology into their teaching and learning process? So if, just as a reminder, S was substitution, A was augmentation, M modification, and R redefinition. Redefinition mean the technology was allowing creation of a new task previously inconceivable. S being using as a direct tool with no functional change. Um, M being technology allowing for a significant task redesign. All right, so I'm seeing we have 3 responses right now. Janardhan says augmentation, then modification. Anushka says modification. Divya is saying either augmentation or modification. Shirish says modification. Alicia says modification. Priyanka says augmentation and modification. Aruba says modification and redefinition. So the way I analyze this is that I saw this as actually a mixture of substitution and redefinition. It starts with really, taking a task that in a teaching learning process is pretty typical, dealing with frequently asked questions, clarifying doubts, making sure students understand what the assignments are, when students introduce themselves, replying back. But then it does that at that scale that it does, where there are so many people, and it does that in those 15-minute intervals at scale. And then that creates, the redefinition. So we can move on to the next slide. So the team in their research paper states that there was only a 10% difference in student retention, that is in the number of students who completed the course between their online and residential course. And also they had comparable results on the assessments between both models. And in terms of the nature of the learning group, this was a class on artificial intelligence, and there were budding computer scientists in the class. So Professor Goyal and team felt that the questions around the ethics of using Jill Watson, particularly the first few times when this team was still training this virtual training assistant, was was slightly sort of simpler versus if it was being done in any other topic area, which was, not connected to computer science and technology in that way. So the first few times they did not point out to the students that there was actually a bot answering their questions versus a human, and that bot existed within their team in a rather anonymous fashion. Over time they released information because the students themselves started to identify that there is this a bot. Like, as you can see on the screen, there is a text box that says that, which Ashok Goyal mentions in his TED talk, that he says that I'm beginning to wonder if Jill is a computer, because if anything this class has taught me is that I should always question if somebody I'm meeting online is an AI or not. And that's the sort of I would say flexibility teaching computer scientists gave this team to sort of do what they're doing. And they have a whole research paper where they talk about in detail what their thought process on the ethics of doing this is. Why is it right? Why is it they do stand by what they're doing, and why it sort of makes sense given the nature of the learning group. We can move on to the next slide. Yeah. So in terms of impact of the virtual teaching assistant on females versus males, since the virtual teaching assistant relied on using past questions learners had asked in previous course deliveries, the virtual teaching assistant was showcasing a bias towards the dominant population, that is males. In computer science, your statistics show that there are way more males studying that than females. And the bot was then getting trained and knew how to handle situations where which were more specific to when males were asking a question. So for example, in an introduction part of the class, a male student and a female student shared news that they were pregnant, and the bot sort of congratulated the male student and sort of ignored what the female student said altogether. So this is just a small example in which how maybe the bot is able to create different not be able to manage situations, and what very much, like human beings, the kind of intelligence we bring to situations is so integral. Our ability to contextualize and use common sense is extremely sort of important, which AI is always going to sort of be this very task specific, very sort of be doing it in that fashion, which human is very differently. Obviously we are a lot more evolved in our lives, and can handle a lot more diversity. But that is something the team kept in mind, and they were shocked by this difference in behavior, and they have changed their strategy with regards to how they train these agents now. So let's move on. So Betty's Brain is example number 2. Betty's Brain is a collaboration by the Teachable Agents group in Stanford University and Vanderbilt University. So Betty's Brain, it's a computer-based learning environment, and it capitalizes on the social aspects of learning. So it was utilized to make learning science. So the subject matter area is science, and their goal was to make it active, constructive, engaging for middle school students. In Betty's Brain, students instruct a software character called a teachable agent, which can reason with how it is being taught. So this teachable agent here is the AI, and it's a mixture of what the student does and what it's able to learn on its own. And through that process, so the teachable agent is dependent on the student in terms of how it's performing. So here it's not a case of, when you think of technology getting integrated, you may think, technology is teaching the student or something. But here what I got very excited about when I read this was actually the flip that you see, where a student is, maneuvering an agent and in during their learning process. So it's not here, they're not being computer scientists, they're literally being, science students, middle school students, and they're teaching the computer, and that is aiding their learning process. So one particular feature of this Betty's Brain program to be highlighted is a AAA challenge game show that they have. And this game show is an online environment where each of the students have trained a TA, and these TAs interact and compete with each other. So when I say TA, the teaching assistant, not assistant, sorry, teaching agent, you can see there's like a concept map on the left side of the screen. So that is how the student is teaching. They have these, concept maps, and they draw these links. So they use like these blocks, and they draw the relationships between different things in scientific topics. And that's how they're able to, showcase or teach that bot. So that's how the bot is learning, by the students drawing these diagrams. Yeah. So finally, different students teach their TA, and then they can log in, and they're sitting from their homes, and they can sort of chat with their friends online, and then they can get their TAs to compete with each other. And in this competition, a host asks a question, and the TA answers and receives points, and based on that, the student also gets feedback on how well have they taught the teachable agent. And it creates an environment where knowledge is created by improvising through revision, and hence it sort of uses the growth mindset and helps students, their egos are protected from the psychological consequences of failure, wherein the teachable agent may fail, but the teachable agent is a mixture of the student and the artificial intelligence part. And so because of that, the student may not feel complete, sort of, if the agent loses, the emotional impact of losing isn't as strong as when you compete in a competition and you feel that, oh my god, why did I do that, I failed, and all of that. So that's the sort of principle in the way it's used. We can move on to the next slide. So what principle of teaching and learning do you see at play with regards to how Betty's Brain operates? So you can type that in the chat box. Interaction. Self-learning and revision. Learning by teaching. Experimentation and self-learning. So the team that developed this, they describe this as the protege effect, which is essentially that the student takes on the role of a teacher, and in doing that is benefiting their learning process. So they take the teacher and pupil metaphor and sort of use the protege effect towards the student's learning process. So let's move on. So it is found, the kind of impact that you see on the learning outcomes, it is found that students, and they sort of did their control studies and all of that, and students were willing to work harder to learn for their teachable agents than for themselves. So since this was introduced, the students were sort of going through the process of understanding the concepts better, because they now had to teach something else, and through that process they became sort of more sort of diligent about the effort they were putting in. And this impacted traditionally low achieving students and also girls in terms of the numbers. When the learner groups, as they were looking at it, this actually enhanced this sort of increase in performance you're seeing mostly for traditionally low achieving students and girls. So that sense of responsibility, that sense of being able to be the teacher, actually helped the students perform better. So I mean, this was extremely exciting for me when I read about this, and I thought that there's a lot of ways in which we could use this as educators. So so let's move forward. So having shared all those examples, as you can see, there are many different ways in which these different technologies can be leveraged. And when you design a learning experience, there are certain questions that we have to ask ourselves about how we're using this media, how are we using these technologies? And the potential of these technologies has to be looked at in reference to the entire context. So the context is, who is the learner group? What access do they already have to technologies? What are their current levels and habits with using these technologies? Are they familiar? Are they comfortable? Is this something that they can be taught remotely at all? I'm not even talking about the subject, I'm talking about the interaction with the technology itself. And given the kind of digital divide that you see in India, in a country like India, we have to consider issues of access with regards to the devices, expecting students having devices to be used, and also the languages that these softwares tend to get built in. So very often the nature of the content of subject matter also impacts the ability of how education technologies can build out different programs and different media. So for example, teaching science online is possible. If you saw with Betty's Brain how there are relationships, you can teach it like that, but there are certain subjects which aren't as easily translatable to the online context. While I sort of for this research work spoke to Professor Ashok Goyal, and he in fact pointed out on architecture and design being sort of subjects which are difficult to recreate in these environments, as per him, in terms of the virtual teaching assistants and things like that. At the end of the day, the whole teaching learning process could be broken down, and you'll have to look at each and every task, that each and every interaction that a student is doing, and you may be able to bring in technology to some of those parts. If we could ensure that everyone's on mute. Okay, that's my own. Yeah. So essentially, not all subjects can be taught online. So subjects might require teaching learning style and might use a lot of discussion and debate. And sometimes you have to ask, is this discussion and debate possible on the online media? Are these conversations, do you think we can create an environment where our learners feel safe to potentially discuss what needs to be discussed? So not all conversations are possible online. And we can move on to the next slide. And if we don't consider these questions, I think the nuance and attention that these questions deserve is a lot. And if we get into the rush of designing and creating and implementing these solutions, I feel that we risk harming our learners more, versus if we were to do nothing at all. Yeah, so that's the end of the presentation, and I'm going to pass it on to Lennon for the Q&A session. I'd love to sort of hear, what are your takeaways as we're doing this. What are your takeaways? If you want to take a few seconds to think about that, and then we can get into a discussion.
So, Ragini, we have one question from Janardhan, who's asking that the student becomes the master even with CAD.
CAD, could you elaborate on that for me, please?
Okay, so we have another question from Pashupati. The question is, when making decisions to adopt online learning, who makes the decision and who are the people who gives inputs?
So that's a question that I'm sure I'm not the expert on, and I'm fairly sure many in the room are experts on that. It's obviously a team that has to decide that, and yeah.
So we have another interesting question by Divya. So she's saying that she's still unable to understand how she can apply this as an independent teacher.
Yeah. So I think sort of the goal for me as I'm sort of speaking about this is, maybe we could go to the design consideration slide. That's the slide before the slide that's being viewed right now. Yeah. So I think as we, if I had to give, very practical sort of what can as a teacher one do in when you're sort of trying to transition online, I'd sort of want to start with saying, the goal of my presentation was more to just sort of first talk about what are the different ways we could actually use these technologies in a way to elevate what the quality of learning and teaching could look like. There's a lot of experimentation being done in this domain, and I was trying to share some of that. Having said that, obviously the need of the hour right now is to do a lot more sort of emergency remote, not so much time and resources to do those kind of projects. So these are the sort of questions I'd say that you should start with understanding. If you're the teacher and you are trying to use the online medium, start with asking, first of all, what are the current habits of my learner group with technology? What are the platforms they're already on? What are the devices they already use? Do they have access to the devices? Is there any sort of sociological other factors involved in them using these devices? Are they allowed to, if they do their parents allow them to use these devices? Also, when you think about the age group, think about like how early in the process would you really want a child to start using these devices. How much time do you want your lessons to be? So the work that I'm doing currently, I'm seeing a lot of people wanting to translate what they had as long 3-4 hour classes to continue with the same timing. But however, being online in an online class is extremely sort of draining to be on Zoom for those many hours. So can the teacher sort of break the lesson up? Can you make videos for some parts of your lesson, send them out, let them watch that in their own time and space, and then when they come to the class, you're doing more of the social aspects of learning. So think about the fact that being online for that extended period of time is pretty draining for a person, and fatiguing. So think about that. And yes, think about what is possible online? What are some conversations you may just not want to be having in an online format, and what are some which, what are some, like, can you focus on certain parts or learning objectives which are more easily done, and like I would say keeps the creation of a safe space is still the most important, so you still need to keep that in mind as you're designing. So I hope that helps. I hope that's slightly more practical and can help with as you're thinking through, like, these are some considerations to think through.
There's another related question. I think it's covered in your response previously. So it's from Anushka, who's asking, how should we make online learning engaging and build a connect with students we've never met?
With students you have never met, that's definitely an extremely difficult task. So one of the ways in which I have seen people do this is once, how I sort of started the session today, if it was a group that could use their videos and stuff, starting out the course, ensure it's not like everybody's on mute, everyone's their videos off, but also like having space to talk to each other or see each other. I mean, starting with just seeing each other, I think. Then second, building in a lot more those sort of in smaller interactions of breaking out and having time to discuss. So one practice that I saw being implemented a lot was after every 10 to 15 minute intervals, breaking out the teacher's lecture and creating space for people to discuss with each other what they were learning and stuff. So that was one other way of doing that. I'd say that you may also need to sort of support the student on a one-on-one more in such a format. And sort of closing the loop on what's happening becomes even so more important because they're so far away. So you've got to sort of, the normal timelines of how things would happen is difficult, and the sort of, if you're able to sort of close the loops in shorter timelines, that is better for the student, because then they can sort of keep going on that and versus sort of drop out of the whole learning process.
So we have another question from Sirish, who's asking, are there any specific points to watch out for or avoid when talking to students online, especially new online learners? Anything to watch out for or avoid? Some key points.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I'd say that if they're new to online learning, I think expecting that they'd be able to, on their own figure out how to set up a device, how to first of all, where will they get access to the device? Do we know for sure that they have access to that device? What all will have to happen for them to get access to the device? Is that creating any other harm on them in any other way? That's one question to ask. And two, do they know how to even, if you're sending material through email or you're sending it on a platform, do they know how to open that website out and open it? Something as simple as that. So I'm seeing sort of interesting examples. I'm hearing of people, doing a mixture of sending packages home. So, people are sending worksheets home, and then whatever's happening online. So that's what a lot of American schools seem to be doing, which is your teacher sends you some analog material that comes to home, and then some which is happening on the screen. So that could be, I don't know if you can send material to the student, but essentially speaking, I'm from a more sort of conservative view, I would say, which is that, I think in a situation like this, if the majority of the group doesn't have, or if even one student doesn't have access to devices, then as a educational institution, you'd have to make sure, before you make it the norm that EdTech is being used, you need to make sure that all your students have access to the devices. So the college where I was studying, when this happened, they actually sort of had an emergency fund created where we could borrow laptops if was required. So that system was put in place at the same time the learning system was put in place. So it's not only about the pedagogy, but it's also about, the infrastructure where they sort of made sure that if we didn't have working computers, there was a process we could go through to get computers in our spaces at home. Yeah.
We'll take one last question. This is by Shobha, who's asking, what are the viable edtech tools to reach students in rural India remotely?
So I'd say that there seem to be a lot of what educational technologists called high tech, low tech, which is basically that it's a lot of low tech initiatives that can do a lot of different things. I think one resource that I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, which is called Silver Linings for Learning, which sort of is curating a lot of these examples from across the world right now. So I definitely say check that out. Silver Lining for Learning. Chris Didi, you can type that in your Google and you'll find the blog. But there are various different examples of what people are doing across the world, and you can see, more specific things which might suit your context better. Yeah.
Great. I know there are a lot of other questions which I'll going to answer, but due to the paucity of time, we'll have to move forward. So we are just launching a feedback poll. So if you could just give us your feedback, which will help us improve on the further masterclasses. So while we are answering the poll, on your chat box, you can see the Facebook page of Trainer Tribe, the link to join the Facebook page. So Trainer Tribe is a large network of educators, an online network of educators, an initiative of Quest Alliance. So we have educators all over the country on the page. So do join us here, and most of the questions and the discussions that we have started here can be continued on the page. And I'm sure Ragini will also join us to facilitate some of these discussions on the page. So do join us there. We can share our best practices, get to know inspirational stories, and share our concerns, questions, and resolve it among ourselves. So it's a strong tribe of educators, and it's a thriving group out there. So please join us on Trainer Tribe. The link is on your chat. So we'll wait for a couple of more seconds before we close the poll. We are about 47% of people who have actually participated in the poll. Would request the others to also give their feedback. We'll be closing the poll in the next 30 seconds. So Ragini, thank you very much for engaging a very interactive and insightful session. I know it's quite early for you out there, but thank you for accepting the invitation to speak on your experience and share with us your insights on the topic that we discussed. It was wonderful to hear from you and your experience. We look forward to having you facilitate more sessions like this in the future. And thank you each one of you for joining us on a Friday evening. Stay safe, take care, Please do join us on our Trainer Tribe page, where you will get to know about our upcoming masterclasses. And we will be having an interesting set of masterclasses in the upcoming weeks too. So thank you one and all. And thank you once again, Ragini, for an insightful session.
Thank you.
Any last
everyone.
words, Ragini? Anything before you sign out?
Just thank you for engaging, and I sort of shared my LinkedIn details right in the beginning, so you can definitely direct message me on that, and I'll definitely be responsive. And I'd love to sort of share resources and other sort of, if you have specific questions, so please do reach out. I do plan to reply. So yeah, great speaking with everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Ragini. Thank you all. Stay safe, take care, and we will see you soon for our next masterclass. We'll be ending the meeting the next 30 seconds.